A master class is a class given to students of a particular discipline by an expert of that discipline. Jesus is the one who taught the original master class on what it means to live fully in His plan for us when He gave His famous Sermon on the Mount. It's not about how we ought to live as much as it is about how we were meant to live. Let the words of the Sermon on the Mount lead you straight to the Master Himself.
All right, well, welcome back here on Viewpoints. I'm your host today, and I'm sitting here with Dr. John Gerlach. John, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How's life for you? You're 3 weeks married?
3 weeks married.
Wow.
Yeah, it's going quick. Everything is going quick. I mean, we already got Christmas decorations in the Commons, and
Yeah.
it's been good. So, by the way, when do you put up your Christmas tree?
We always put it up before Halloween.
Is it up? So it's up right now.
Oh, it's been up. It's been up for about 2 or 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm still deciding when to put up the Christmas lights. It's like, I don't know.
I got lights
Well,
up. I got happens every year.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know. Some would say that's too early, but
Someone says too early, but they don't work at Miss Casey's
That's
Christmas
true.
store.
That's true.
Or
yes,
what
very
used
cool.
to be Miss Casey's Christmas store.
Well, John, we have an exciting topic today, standing out in the world that's fitting in, and we're going to be discussing here in Matthew 7 and 13. But what are some of the topics that Jesus talks about in this chapter?
Yeah, this is a pretty challenging. He's just kind of going toward the end of the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus gets pretty challenging on some different topics, and he talks about this narrow way, broad way that leads to destruction.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about, and then watch out for false prophets, and a lot of things in the Bible about, kind of when the end times, you have a lot of stuff about false prophets. You have a lot of things about Jesus warning, a lot of warnings, and this is one of his warnings. His warnings is, I think there's two big things here. One is, what path are you on?
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, watch out for people that are in the category of false prophets.
Yeah. We were talking before the podcast about these two paths that he was talking about. Why do you think that this is so important? And do you feel like it's more important in today's world that we're living?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's like, it's interesting how Jesus says, well, the gate is wide and, it's a broad way
Mm-hmm.
to go, an easy way to go that leads to destruction. So I thought, okay, but Jesus' point is, so evaluate where you are. Are you on the narrow path that leads to life? Are you on the broad path? Now, so what would that mean? I think one thing is, if you saw that everything, you're just like kind of our world, our culture, if there's no difference at all, I think you got to go, wow, what path am I on here?
Mm-hmm.
So because the idea of the narrow gate, the narrow path is an idea of, it's probably not going to be the same opinions, the same viewpoints as everybody else. It's just not.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of implied in the whole kind of process.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not popular. The path's not the popular path, and it's not the easy path. So I think there's going to be difficulties. You're going to have people oppose you.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're going to, you could get called, you're narrow-minded, all this kind of stuff. So, but the big warning is, know which path you're on, because this passage ends with this really unbelievable thing where Jesus says, people are going to say to me, Lord, and I'm going to say, I never knew you.
Yeah.
And so Jesus' end of the warning is, there's some people who think they're good with God, but they aren't.
Yeah. That's crazy that you mentioned that. I've actually had experiences like where my friends would try to show me something, and I'd be like, no. Or I would go like, hey, what are you looking at? And they would be like, and this is back when I played hockey, they'd be like, well, you're too close-minded to look at this stuff. And so that's actually really interesting. And I'm sure a lot of people listening have had the same experiences with that. You talked about false prophets and teachers. Do you feel like there are some today?
Yeah, I think you've got a situation where false prophets have always been around, and they're always going to be. And I think we wrote about this in the blog, but one of the things is there's several criteria, several ways to tell a false prophet. I mean, to me, the number one thing, I gave a list in the blog, but The number one thing is they deny Jesus is the Son of God.
Mm.
Oh, they might even be a religion that says, oh, he's an angel, or he was a prophet just like there's other prophets, or there's all kind of different ways to deny the deity. That doesn't mean, oh yeah, well, no, he's a great guy. He was a prophet. Mm-hmm. But that's denying the deity of Christ. So number one criteria of knowing a false prophet is they deny the deity of Christ. And then Jesus says you're going to know them by their fruit, which means their life. It's going to come out eventually in their life that this was, a lot of things that were fake in their life. Yeah. Just pretending.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you feel like, is it hard to kind of go into the category, and we don't have to go into it too deep, but the wolf in sheep's clothing method, there's a lot of criteria for that too, right?
Yeah, and Jesus uses those words even. He says, they look like harmless sheep. I mean, I can take on a harmless sheep. Mm-hmm. I mean, I personally can take on a harmless sheep, but they go, no, that's really a wolf. But you think it's a sheep, and you don't realize the destruction that they're going to lead you toward by their life and their leadership. I mean, I still remember this guy that was coming to church at Crestview for a while, and he became a Christian, and he said, "Man, I've been checking all this stuff out online, and he tells me all this kind of crazy stuff about, oh yeah, you should be. I've got to send half my money to this guy that's online, and I've got to do this and do that." I'm going, where did you get that? He goes, online, and it's just, to me, it was a bunch of false prophets type people who were just in it for themselves. They were like the wolves. Yeah, they weren't the sheep. Absolutely. They were like the wolves for sure.
And sometimes too, and I wanted to ask you about this, is a lot of times we see people always talking about certain people, and then it persuades people to go that way. Do you feel like popular culture has a way of kind of shifting more focus to false teachers?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's going to be one of the things. If you go through Revelation, you go through the whole Antichrist idea. Antichrist is going to be popular. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be scary. I mean, it's going to be like, oh, this is the greatest person around. Sure. Let's the whole world gets behind him. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely popular is almost like a red light thing. Like, well, I just got to make sure. And I think we always got to hold God's truth against it to go, okay, that doesn't match up, or it does match up. Sure. So you got to always have that kind of going on, I think.
That's an interesting take on that. For the listener, how do we pay attention to Jesus' warnings in this chapter?
Yeah, I think there's several things that we need to realize. I think one thing is about our culture. Our culture, we were in group one Monday night, and everybody was saying, it's hard. Mm-hmm. It's like they were asking me, and we were having the discussion and asking each other, how do you answer it when somebody says, well, you just need to be you, or that's your truth? Right. Well, it is my truth, and it's this whole idea of kind of you be you figure out who you're supposed to be, and then that's great. And you create your own identity, basically. Mm-hmm. And so the highest good is your freedom, your self-expression. You express you. Don't try to fit into anybody's mold. Don't try to fit anybody's morality, anybody's whatever. You just do you. And I think that's another kind of, not a false teacher thing, false prophet thing maybe, but it is the same kind of impact though. You hear that enough, that gets popular enough, and everybody's going, well, but I need to figure out me. I've got to do me. I know, I mean, I remember this post that somebody I knew the other day posted, this is going to be, all my Christian friends aren't going to like this, but I've just made this big decision. Wow. And it's like, but everybody's been telling me this, and so I'm going to go with it. Mm-hmm. So it's, it's kind of interesting that they had that kind of reaction. But I do think we're definitely have that impact on us where we hear things over and over again. You be you, that's your truth. In other words, well, you think that, but don't think I need to think that. Sure. So what it does is it takes away absolute truth. Mm-hmm. There is no absolute truth. And so, I think for a Christian to navigate the false prophets, some of the false teachings is really, really important. And so how we pay attention to Jesus' warning here is how to deal with that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple ways we can respond. I think one of them is to go with God's truth, which is simply, look, your worth is not you being you or you expressing yourself or finding a certain identity. Our worth is how God looks at us.
Mm-hmm.
And he has said we're made in his image. And that's supposed to be our worth. So we trade that off for, well, I'm just being the best of me or whatever. People, go down that road. And then the other thing is our affirmation, again, comes from God. He says, I made you, I created you, I love you, I give you grace, I've got a purpose for you. And, I don't know, the whole idea of being in your own head thinking about, that's a dark place to be sometimes, I think, for people to go, well, I just need to be me. But, God goes, but I'm your maker, so I kind of know the answers to that question. And, the other thing is that we truly are broken. We, none of that you be you talks about being broken. Mm-hmm. None of that, that's your truth. None of that's about being broken and in need or rebellious or anything like that, which is what we've got to solve through a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
None of that gets solved by any of that.
Sure.
It's just like, oh, you're just being you. Mm-hmm. But it's funny, all that just be you tends to be just like a whole bunch of other people.
Right.
It really boils down to that. I call it the Harley Davidson syndrome. It's like, hey, I'm a rebel. I'm going to ride my Harley. I'm going to do this. And I'm going to wear exactly what everybody else wears that rides a Harley.
Right.
It's like, what?
Well, yeah.
You're just like we tend to. So it kind of tends to be that way.
Yeah.
All these people are posting about, well, I'm going to join them, and they're right about that. I need to express myself. So Jesus just goes, watch out. You've got this Broadway. It's right there before you all the time. That will lead to a bad place. You'll be in destruction's the word he uses. In this narrow way, God's way, and it's going to be something we have to help each other go through, and then realize our truth, our value, our identity is always going to be found in Christ.
That's good. Yeah, it reminds me, as you were speaking, I remember, and I need to send this to you. It's actually, it was a podcast with Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, uh-huh.
And he was saying, the person interviewing him was saying, like, how did you come to your faith, or how did you become into your, I guess the new word is spirituality.
Uh-huh.
And he was saying, I went to Young Life, and I was, teenage years, and I just finally got to the point where I didn't like the rules of the Bible. And so I just kind of found my own walk of faith. Right. Or I didn't like how I should live or something. It was something weird like that. And I was like, that is so crazy that someone really didn't foster that or help him along the way. He was just like, kind of like find your own truth, that type of deal.
Right.
And just the scary side effect of that, of kind of just steering off and doing your own thing.
Mm-hmm.
But John, anything else that you would like to leave the listener with today?
It's interesting. I'll just throw this in. I didn't know you were going to talk about Aaron Rodgers, but I actually heard a podcast by Aaron Rodgers' youth pastor.
Really?
Who was talking about him being at camp, and evidently in high school he was all that, and everybody was like, "Oh, Aaron Rodgers is here," and he was already well known.
Interesting.
But he was talking about the camps. He was at the camps that he was at, but somewhere along the line he kind of made that decision to go, I'm gonna kind of come to my own truth, and I don't. And that is one of the things where it's like, hey, that stuff in the Bible, that morality, that's outdated.
Yeah.
That's
kind of where he was going with it.
Yeah, and that's going to be one of the signs of you just got to find your own truth thing that is, to me, one of the, not a false prophet, but false teaching that is around us. So it is a real battle that we're all in.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. John, thank you so much for just, again, kind of just breaking this down for us and for the listeners today. And what an amazing sermon you preached this Sunday morning. We're excited to kind of go into the holiday season. We're excited what's coming up. We have some guests that are going to be joining us too on the podcast we're excited about. So again, thank you to the listener. God bless. And we'll see you next time.